Thank you, Community Advocates Board. Good evening, everybody. It's very exciting to be here. Every year it's very exciting, and every year it gets more exciting. As I look out at the more than 300 wonderful, beautiful people filling this room, I know some of you have not met Joan Saltzman, whom I'm about to introduce. I urge you to read her bio in the journal, and I ask you to talk to those of us who do know her so we can tell you about her. The many here who do know Joan know her unflinching courage and her bone-deep commitment, her wisdom, vision, and generosity, her empathy, compassion, and caring, her unfailing sense of responsibility, sense of fairness, and sense of humor, all of which help to protect and preserve her humane perspective about life and living, and help inform the perspective of others around her. Those of us who know Joan recognize her unshakable integrity, personal code of ethics, and complete honesty. We have seen her intellect, charm, tact, and tenacity move mountains and bring large and small miracles to life, while almost never acknowledging the role she has had in these achievements. We know Joan has helped to improve the lives of countless children, adolescents, and adults throughout Long Island and across New York State, frequently victims of discrimination because of their color, their ethnicity, income, and often their disability. She has enriched and changed their lives and the lives of their families, the organizations that serve them, and the communities in which they live, helping them all to grow and flourish. I know my modest friend Joan. She's saying to herself, who is Marge talking about? I'd like to meet that person someday. Joan, I am talking about you. And everyone who knows Joan will agree with everything I said. We admire, respect, and love you dearly. And now, on behalf of the Erase Racism Board of Directors, it gives me tremendous pride and pleasure to introduce our very special colleague, friend, and contributor in so many ways, Abraham Krasnoff, Courage and Commitment honoree, Joan R. Saltzman.
I'm quite overwhelmed, and I was cautioned not to say anything nice about my friend Marge, but I'm not paying attention. Marge and I have worked together for many, many years and become very close friends. Her high ideals, her passions, and her enlightened commitment to all the right things are remarkable. We all owe her thanks, and and especially in the past. And thank you, Elaine. And thank you, everybody who's sitting here. You're all very important people. I'd like you all to know my family, who is sitting right here. And the things that I haven't learned from these people, I've learned from those people. And thank you, Elaine and Ford, for this very important moment in my life. And while we're here celebrating, I want to mention somebody who is missing, too. Abe Krasnov, with great affection and respect. I think many of you remember him, his wisdom, his foresight, and his wonderful good humor. Erase Racism, the Long Island Community Foundation, and so many other organizations, leaders, and decision makers learned great and important lessons from Abe, as did I. And I'm so happy to see Susie Sonnenberg here, my good friend, and one who has had a tremendous force of good on this island, and will continue. There's a long, long list of people I'd like to thank. No, don't worry, I'm not going to do this. Although I wish I could. And Dr. Brown, you certainly belong on that list. I just will take one more moment to thank Elaine Gross for our unique vision and we've learned an awful lot. The board members who are sitting here for their persistent advocacy, research, policy analysis. Those are the things that have brought about change where change is sorely needed. I'll go back a little bit in time. As a much, much younger woman, I helped create Community Advocates. This was more than 40 years ago, and served as its first president and CEO. My colleagues and I came into direct contact with bold, bad discriminatory practices. Ugly discrimination in hospital emergency rooms, realtors' offices, and in our educational institutions. We found discriminatory practices in many local places of business, in pharmacies, for example. We found many pharmacies were charging African American customers more for the same prescriptions on the same day, indeed the same hour, as they were charging white people. We acted. We made change where we could. However, whether we were responding to blatant racism of pharmacists, law enforcement officers, or in the insidious prejudice in schools, we needed then, as we do now, the expertise, the power, and the professionalism that a race brings to this struggle. And that's why we're all here. During Community Advocates' early years, racism in housing was endemic. And being like the men who tilted at windmills, Marge and I acquired a small apartment house in Roslyn. Our tenants were primarily single women with children, African American and Hispanic, fine people with hard lives. Most of my colleagues and I had never been the object of racist anger before. Midnight calls, threatening and venomous, disrupted PTA meetings, distorted articles in local newspapers, and more, much more. This was a long time ago. Ours was a small effort to try to start and move toward a more meaningful solution. Racism has been historically active in housing on Long Island. We all know that. But now as a race launches its second decade and brings greater strength to its efforts, the future for Long Island looks much, much brighter. However, on page 1 today, we read about the perilous economic times we live in and Long Island is certainly suffering. Our area lags most in regaining jobs lost in the recent recession. Federal, state, and county programs are being cut or eliminated, and people of color and low-income workers bear the brunt of these cuts. Indeed, even many of the organizations who are represented here by people in the helper community are in danger of disappearing. Have I cheered everybody up? It is appropriate and essential then that individually and collectively we not only stay strong, but we celebrate and support the effective force that is racism. As one gets older or old, the wise and good use of time, energy, and resources becomes more appropriate, indeed more necessary, and more gratifying. And so recognition of any contribution toward the greater good is indeed very nice. Wonderful, really. And so I thank you for this special recognition tonight. Thank you all.